decorated Army veteran, an unusual chain of events, and an iconic hotel, what could have led Matthew Livelsberger, a man known for his service to his country, to orchestrate such a shocking incident? Was this an intentional act, or were there underlying factors driving the actions of someone once regarded as a hero? On January 1st, 2025, a significant event outside the Trump International Hotel shook Las Vegas, leaving behind a series of unanswered questions that continue to captivate investigators. The individual at the center of this story, 37-year-old Matthew Livelsberger, was far from an ordinary man. A highly decorated Army Special Forces veteran, Livelsberger had served in challenging missions worldwide, earning recognition for his courage and dedication. But on that day, Livelsberger found himself far removed from the battlefield, yet in the middle of an event that raised alarm bells nationwide. The incident involved a rented Tesla Cybertruck containing hazardous materials. The details of how and why this happened remain a puzzle, but it resulted in injuries and raised questions about motive and intent. Investigators discovered concerning materials inside the vehicle, prompting authorities to dig deeper into Livelsberger's background and recent actions. The truck, rented from Colorado Springs, had traveled a long distance to Las Vegas. Tragically, Livelsberger himself did not survive the event, leaving behind a trail of clues and unanswered questions. Adding to the intrigue was a similar incident on the same day in New Orleans, involving another vehicle and hazardous materials. Though no official link has been established between the two events, the timing and nature of the incidents are difficult to dismiss as coincidence. This case raises profound questions about the mental and emotional toll of high-stakes military service and the pressures individuals face upon returning to civilian life. Today, we delve into this story, exploring its complexities while acknowledging the lingering mysteries. This is a story that has sparked discussions about resilience, mental health, and the challenges of reintegration. What could lead someone who once served their country with distinction to such an outcome? Is there a deeper narrative behind this tragic series of events? Before we continue, there is a need for a disclaimer. This video blends factual details with dramatized elements for storytelling purposes. While inspired by real events and supported by publicly available information, some aspects have been enhanced or imagined to provide a compelling narrative. Names and images may have been changed for privacy or legal reasons, and certain facts may differ from official reports. This is not an official investigation, and we are not affiliated with any investigative bodies. The content is intended to inform and entertain, and we do not condone or promote violence in any form. Viewer discretion is advised. Matthew Livelsberger's story begins long before the tragic events of January 1st, 2025. Born and raised in rural Pennsylvania, he grew up in a community that deeply valued service and patriotism. For Matthew, enlisting in the military was a natural step, driven by a profound sense of duty and a desire to contribute to something greater than himself. His family had long held the military in high regard, and Matthew embraced this legacy with pride. From the moment he joined the U.S. Army straight out of high school, it was evident he was determined to excel. His dedication, resilience, and discipline propelled him through the ranks. By his mid-20s, he had undergone the demanding training required to join the elite U.S. school, Army Special Forces, the Green Berets. Matthew became part of a highly skilled unit assigned to challenging missions in some of the world's most dangerous regions. Throughout his military career, Livelsberger distinguished himself with acts of bravery. He served on multiple deployments to conflict zones, including Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Ukraine, where his unit carried out critical operations. His courage and leadership under challenging circumstances earned him numerous commendations, including 2 Bronze Stars, one of which was awarded for valor. However, as his accolades grew, so did the weight he carried. Friends and family began noticing subtle changes in his behavior after each deployment. He became more reserved, his humor darkened, and he seemed increasingly distant. While he maintained a strong sense of duty and patriotism, those close to him sensed that his experiences abroad had left a lasting impact. Livelsberger's family, proud of his achievements, also noticed the emotional toll his service had taken. Conversations during his visits home often revolved around his time overseas, and although he reassured them he was managing, they couldn't ignore the signs of strain. He spoke less of his aspirations and more of the challenges he had faced. His personal struggles went beyond emotional fatigue. The pressure to meet the high demands of his role as a Green Beret began to weigh heavily on him. The expectation to remain mentally and physically resilient in the face of adversity was a burden that over time seemed to grow unbearable. As the years passed, the strain began to manifest in more noticeable ways. Livelsberger, who had once been deeply connected to his family and community, became increasingly withdrawn. His relationships with loved ones grew strained as he struggled to reconcile the man he had become with the man he once was. During his time off duty, Matthew developed a strong interest in the technical aspects of his profession. His fascination with the mechanics of equipment and technology, particularly vehicles and tools associated with his training, became a focal point. Those around him noticed he often spent time working on projects that seemed to absorb his attention completely. While his skills were impressive, the intensity with which he pursued these interests raised quiet concerns. In late 2024, Matthew took a leave of absence to address personal matters. During this period, his behavior became more isolative. He rented a Tesla Cybertruck in Colorado Springs, a vehicle that, while striking in design, drew little attention at the time. However, investigators would later determine that the truck had been modified, sparking further questions about Matthew's state of mind and intentions. As authorities delved into his life, they uncovered indications that Matthew had been exploring fringe ideas during his leave. While there was no definitive evidence of radicalization, there were signs of growing disillusionment with certain ideologies and institutions. His social media activity and participation in online forums suggested he was wrestling with conflicting emotions about his role and purpose. The mounting pressures from his military career, coupled with the psychological toll of years in combat and strained personal relationships, painted a picture of a man struggling under the weight of it all. Whether the events in Las Vegas were the result of personal turmoil or influenced by external factors, one thing was certain: Matthew's journey was a complex and tragic one. This story leaves us with a poignant question. How can we better support individuals like Matthew, who dedicate their lives to service but often carry unseen burdens? Could early intervention have altered the course of his life? The day of the explosion began like any other, ordinary and uneventful. Matthew Livelsberger, a 38-year-old Army Special Forces veteran, rented a Tesla Cybertruck in Colorado Springs. Its sleek, futuristic design contrasted sharply with the gravity of what was about to unfold. The vehicle wasn't significant for its appearance, but rather for what it carried. As Livelsberger traveled east toward Washington, D.C., the reasons for his actions remained a mystery. His destination was the Trump International Hotel, a prominent landmark known for its grandeur and proximity to corridors of power. Why he chose this specific location would only become apparent later. By the time Livelsberger reached the site, events were set in motion that would leave a lasting impact. Witnesses described hearing a sudden, ear-piercing sound, followed by a powerful blast that shook the area. The explosion sent shockwaves through surrounding streets, shattering windows and startling residents. The scene that followed was one of confusion and urgency. Civilians sought safety while emergency responders quickly arrived to address the situation. The damage was significant, yet the timing, early in the morning, helped mitigate the potential for harm. As investigators combed through the aftermath, they uncovered troubling evidence inside the vehicle, materials that indicated a planned act rather than a random event. While no definitive conclusions were drawn at first, the deliberate nature of what had occurred was clear. The hotel, once a symbol of opulence, bore visible scars from the explosion, with parts of its exterior severely damaged. Nearby streets were littered with debris, leaving the neighborhood shaken both physically and emotionally. After the explosion, authorities discovered Livelsberger's body in a nearby alley several blocks from the blast site. The circumstances of his death raised even more questions. Preliminary findings indicated that he had died just before the explosion, under circumstances that pointed to his own involvement. This development left investigators grappling with the complexity of his actions and his motivations. The circumstances of his death raised new and challenging questions about his intentions and state of mind. This tragic event left authorities and the public alike grappling with uncertainty. Was this act intended as a statement, or was it a manifestation of personal struggles? How could someone with a history of service and discipline arrive at such a devastating decision? What could drive someone to such lengths? And in the face of tragedy, how can society address the deeper issues that often remain hidden until it's too late? The moment authorities arrived at the scene of the explosion, the gravity of the situation became clear. This wasn't just another random bombing. It was something highly coordinated, executed with disturbing precision. The FBI swiftly took control of the investigation, calling in specialists from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, along with local law enforcement. Washington, D.C. was on edge, and every detail needed careful examination. From the moment the explosion was reported, law enforcement knew this was no ordinary crime scene. The explosion outside the Trump International Hotel had shaken the city, leaving widespread destruction and confusion. But it was what was found within the wreckage that would provide chilling clues. The Tesla Cybertruck, once sleek and futuristic, was now a twisted wreck. Yet despite the devastation, investigators found key evidence that would begin to explain Livelsberger's actions. Hidden beneath the wreckage was a collection of items that revealed the scale of the intended destruction. As investigators combed through the wreckage, they discovered an alarming arsenal: mortars, gas canisters, camping fuel, and a handgun. These items signaled a deliberate plan, one that was far from impulsive, but meticulously thought out. The mortars, capable of causing catastrophic damage, indicated a preparation for maximum destruction. The gas canisters suggested an intention to cause chaos. The camping fuel was another critical component, possibly intended to help ignite the materials inside the vehicle. In addition, the handgun found in the vehicle raised further questions. Was it meant for self-defense, or was it part of the plan? Its presence only deepened the mystery surrounding the event. As the investigation continued, law enforcement interviewed witnesses who had been nearby when the explosion occurred. Their accounts painted a chilling picture. Many described hearing the blast and feeling the shockwave. A few bystanders recalled seeing a figure near the hotel entrance just before the explosion. One hotel employee mentioned seeing a person walking with purpose, but there were no clear signs that anything unusual was happening at the time. Police officers who had been patrolling nearby rushed to the scene immediately after hearing the explosion. However, the explosive materials made it difficult to assess the situation. The officers suspected they were dealing with something much larger, but did not yet understand its full scale. As investigators pieced together the details, they found a striking similarity to another bombing incident that occurred in New Orleans just months earlier. In that attack, another Army veteran, Shamsuddin Jabbar, had rented a vehicle, packed it with explosives, and carried out a bombing. The similarities between the two incidents were undeniable. Both events involved military veterans, rented vehicles, and explosive devices. Both took place in highly symbolic locations. Both also involved weapons and materials associated with large-scale attacks. Was this a copycat crime, or was there something deeper connecting these events? Law enforcement began considering the possibility that Livelsberger and Jabbar might be linked. Were they connected through shared ideologies or personal circumstances? The FBI's investigative team immediately began looking into Jabbar's background, hoping to uncover any connection between him and Livelsberger. Had they served together in the military? Did they share any common beliefs or affiliations that could explain their actions? As the investigation unfolded, authorities began exploring potential motives behind Livelsberger's actions. What could have led someone with his background to commit such a violent act? Investigators examined his military history, looking for anything that might explain his behavior. Had Livelsberger suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, or was there something more personal driving him? They also investigated his family history and relationships, searching for any signs of radicalization or exposure to harmful ideologies. They looked into his mental health, trying to determine whether there had been warning signs of instability. Was this attack driven by personal rage, or had Livelsberger fallen under the influence of something darker? The connection between Livelsberger and Jabbar raised even more questions. Could they have shared a motive? Were they both part of something larger, influenced by a destructive ideology? The FBI and ATF were committed to uncovering the truth, but at this stage they still had more questions than answers. As the investigation neared a critical point, one key question remained. Was Livelsberger acting alone, or was he part of something far more complex? A network of individuals driven by a shared, dangerous agenda. Could the true motive behind the bombing be even more chilling than anyone had imagined? As investigators delve into the psyche of Matthew Livelsberger, a complex portrait begins to emerge. While we may never fully understand the depths of his motives, experts have pointed to potential psychological factors that could have influenced his actions. Many wonder if Livelsberger's military service played a role in his eventual breakdown. After spending years on the front lines of war, especially in high-stress environments like Afghanistan and Ukraine, could he have been silently battling the ravages of PTSD? Combat veterans are often exposed to violence and trauma that can leave long-lasting scars on the mind. Experts suggest that such experiences may not only cause emotional distress, but also contribute to feelings of isolation, anger, and disillusionment. For Livelsberger, could this torment have escalated into a tragic desire to take drastic action? Was the explosion outside the Trump International Hotel his final, desperate cry for attention, a manifestation of unresolved pain? It's important to consider the effect of mental health struggles that are often overlooked in military contexts. Livelsberger's decision to rent a vehicle, load it with explosives, and head to a public target could have been the result of a mental breakdown, compounded by his years of service. A special forces operator accustomed to making life or death decisions, Livelsberger may have been pushed to the edge by a cocktail of depression, isolation, and unresolved trauma. Another potential influence to consider is the possibility of extremist ideologies. Livelsberger's actions, while shocking, were not entirely disconnected from broader trends in American society. At the time of the explosion, there was a surge in radicalization of individuals, many of whom had military backgrounds, into far-right extremist ideologies. Could Livelsberger have been influenced by these groups, or even adopted their violent rhetoric? His attack was directed at a high-profile target, a symbol of power and wealth, and his choice of weapons and tactics mirrored those used by other violent extremists. It's not outside the realm of possibility that Livelsberger had come to see the world through a lens of radicalism, viewing violence as the only means to address perceived wrongs. Was this a lone wolf attack? Or did Livelsberger, in his isolation and disillusionment, become a pawn in a larger ideological war? Investigators have struggled to pinpoint a concrete motive. While some theories suggest that the explosion could have been an act of domestic terrorism, others speculate that Livelsberger's motivations were deeply personal. Was he seeking revenge on a society that he felt had abandoned him, or was he attempting to send a message to those in power? Given the nature of the attack, there is also the possibility that it was an act of terrorism, an intentional assault on one of the most recognizable symbols of wealth and influence in the U.S. The fact that the target was the Trump International Hotel adds an extra layer of complexity to the case. Was Livelsberger motivated by a political ideology, attempting to strike a blow against what he saw as the corrupt elite? Or was it a more personal form of revenge against the people or institutions he felt had wronged him? Was this a statement about the government, the military-industrial complex, or even his own experiences within the armed forces? The attack's precision, the choice of the weaponry, and the apparent planning involved point to a carefully calculated strike, raising questions about the role of outside influences. Was this simply the tragic action of a man who had lost control, or did his motivations reflect a broader, more organized push against the establishment? Livelsberger's bombing raises echoes of other high-profile cases involving veterans or individuals with a history of trauma. Similar incidents have been reported in which veterans suffering from PTSD or untreated mental health conditions carried out violent acts, often in retaliation for perceived injustices or as part of a misguided attempt to right a wrong. One case that stands out is the 2017 attack in Las Vegas, where a former soldier carried out one of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history. Like Livelsberger, the shooter had a military background and had experienced significant personal stressors. Though the motives behind his actions remain shrouded in mystery, experts speculated that a combination of personal failure, financial stress, and a possible desire for notoriety played a role in his decision to carry out such an atrocity. Additionally, there are notable cases of veterans whose mental health struggles led them down a violent path. Many of them, like Livelsberger, became radicalized in ways that aligned with extremist groups, with military training giving them the skills necessary to carry out mass destruction. One of the most infamous examples is the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, carried out by Timothy McVeigh, a Gulf War veteran who used a rented truck loaded with explosives to attack a federal building. McVeigh's deep dissatisfaction with the government and his extreme political beliefs led to a bombing that killed 168 people, and his case shares disturbing similarities with Livelsberger's actions. Livelsberger's use of a rented vehicle loaded with explosives and firearms is also part of a larger pattern observed in such attacks. These rented vehicles, which have been used as makeshift bombs in multiple incidents, are not only a method of convenience, but also a statement of anonymity, a way for attackers to distance themselves from their crimes and deflect any association with a particular ideology or group. For investigators, this disturbing trend makes it all the more difficult to discern whether these attacks are the result of personal grievances or part of a more extensive, organized campaign of violence. Throughout the investigation, authorities have worked tirelessly to piece together the motives behind this bomb attack, but as with other cases, answers remain elusive. As we ponder these possibilities, one thing is certain. Livelsberger's attack may be a reflection of a much larger societal issue, one that intersects the trauma of military service, mental health struggles, and growing extremist ideologies. Was Livelsberger the victim of a broken system, pushed to the edge by years of trauma, or did he voluntarily step into the world of radical violence? Could this tragedy have been prevented, and what does it say about the treatment of veterans in our society? As we wrap up today's story, we are left with more questions than answers. The explosion outside the Trump International Hotel was a tragic event that has drawn national attention, but what drove Matthew Livelsberger to carry out such an act? A respected Army veteran, he had served his country with honor, but somewhere along the way, something changed. Whether it was the lasting impact of his military service, personal challenges, or an underlying belief system, the full truth may never come to light. The investigation is ongoing, with authorities piecing together the fragments of Livelsberger's life. From the rented Tesla Cybertruck loaded with dangerous materials to the discovery of his self-inflicted injury, every detail adds another layer to the story. We've seen potential connections to broader violent events and a psychological profile that suggests the toll of war and personal struggles. But at the heart of it all remains one question: why? Authorities continue to search for answers, following every lead and examining each piece of evidence. Could Livelsberger have had assistance? Was there a larger plot involved? As investigators delve deeper, we may uncover new insights into what led this Army veteran to take such extreme actions. What other aspects of this case remain hidden? Only time will tell what the future holds. In our next episode, we will focus on the disturbing events surrounding the New York Queens shooting. What began as a normal day quickly spiraled into a night of terror. What was the cause of this sudden outburst of violence? Was it a random incident, or was there something more behind it? Join us as we explore the details and reveal the connection with shocking twists ahead. Be sure to tune in for a closer look at this tragic and puzzling shooting. You won't want to miss the developments. Thank you for joining us today as we explored the unsettling events surrounding Matthew Livelsberger's bombing. If this story intrigued you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter in our ongoing investigation into the darkest sides of human nature. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and always question the narratives we think we know.